Jeff Marek, just a few short days ago, dropped a draft day bombshell that would shake the NHL to its very core. A three-team trade involving the Canucks, the Blackhawks, and the Dallas Stars that sends Jason Robertson to the Blackhawks, Hronek to the Stars, and gives the Vancouver Canucks the 4th overall pick. Is this a realistic heist or a cap-space fantasy? Let's break down the deal that has people talking and absolutely losing their fucking minds over the idea of this. Now, we're not going to go over an article because there isn't an article that talks about this, but we are going to go over to a Reddit page, the R Hawks subreddit, that talks about this idea that Jeff Marek proposed. Now, he mentioned this on the sheet, and he also talked about this on Friday's episode of Sekeres and Price. Now, on the sheet, he had David Pagnotta, and they were talking about it. I have not actually watched that episode of the sheet. I did watch him on Sekeres and Price and him talk, bringing this idea to them. So as we mentioned, this is the official deal. Dallas gets Filip Hronek. They also get the rights to Ilya Mikheyev from the Blackhawks. Vancouver gets the 4th overall pick. They get Ilya Lyubushkin. They also take on Ryan Ellis's contract, which is basically dead cap. And Ellis is currently on LTIR, and he is making $6.25 million. AAV. It's a 8-year deal that he's been a part of, and he hasn't played in quite some time. So he's, like I said, he's currently on LTIR, and we'd only take on that $6.25 million in cap space for one season because he ends up being a UFA in 2027. Now, and then as we mentioned, Chicago gets Jason Robertson. Now, I know what some people are probably thinking, like, that is absolutely insane. And I agree, it is an insane proposal. And the whole reason for this proposal, at least from the Canucks perspective, is to guarantee that they can either get Ivar Stenberg and Caleb Malhotra, or they can get Ivar Stenberg or one of the top defensemen. Basically, they get to pick in the top 5 twice. That is the whole purpose behind the Canucks. And then really, managing to make a huge splash at this year's draft, especially with the new regime of Ryan Johnson and the Sedins. Not to mention, it's also very reminiscent of 1999, where Brian Burke, finagled at the draft and was able to come away with both Henrik and Daniel Sedin. He made some trades, talked to teams being like, we'll give you this if you do not draft one of these two twins. This is kind of a similar situation here, and it does include, and Marek did bring this up, that the Canucks could give San Jose back their 2nd round pick that they got in the Kiefer Sherwood trade as a way, as incentive for them not to pick Stenberg. I know it sounds a little silly because we don't know if the Sharks will actually take Stenberg. I know we've talked about it on this channel, how, San Jose may want to go the defenseman route because that is what they desperately freaking need right now. I know a lot of San Jose Shark fans are like, BPA, Mike Greer is going to go with BPA. Well, we also do not know if best player available to the Sharks is Stenberg. I know, sounds crazy, but not to mention at the same time, yes, best player available is usually the way to go, but teams have been known to go off the board, and that is no different for the San Jose Sharks and Mike Greer. Yes, Greer usually always goes best player available, but just because he's done it multiple times does not mean he's going to do it again, and he could very well go off the board and realize, hey, we need help on the backhand. Let's get one of these young stud defensemen here with the 2nd overall pick and pick up, like, for example, a Chase Reed or a Carson Karels or a Keaton Vierhoff, and then, we're already stacked up front. We don't necessarily need Stenberg, even though they would probably benefit very much from having a guy like Stenberg with Macklin Celebrini, but they want to, they're at the tail end of their rebuild. they want to compete, and if they can shore up or get their defense on the right track, you land one of those stud defensemen, and then Stenberg falls to the Canucks at third. So for this scenario, if this were to go through and the Canucks would get the 4th overall pick, they could pick Stenberg with the 3rd overall pick, and then if they still wanted Caleb Malhotra, they could get Caleb Malhotra with the 4th overall pick, or they could go with one of the defensemen that are left on the board, depending on who San Jose ends up picking. But let's take a look at the comments from this subreddit. And of course, once again, this is a Chicago Blackhawks Reddit page. I actually couldn't find anything on the Canucks subreddit, which is a little strange. So that's why we were looking at a Hawks one. This person, Rich Rap 9333, does say his first impression of this is not enough for Jason Robertson, but he does mention that the discussion on the show included speculation that this might not even be enough for the 4th overall pick. He's going with thoughts on this. Nitty Kitty 47 says you do that in a heartbeat. Not too sure if she's a Canucks fan or not, or who she's referring to do it in a heartbeat. And then Rich Rap says, what if this had no contract extension for Robertson? Because remember, Jason Robertson needs a contract extension. And this, people are probably wondering why. Dallas, why would you give up a stud like Jason Robertson? They can't afford him. There's a cap crunch when it comes to Dallas, because Robertson is probably going to want something like $12 million or more, potentially maybe even Kaprizov money to stay in Dallas. Dallas has a whole bunch of players they need to sign, like Maverick Bork, for example. They need to re-sign him, so they can't really have both at this point. So that is why there's speculation on, and plus there's been speculation about Robertson being moved, and even according to Marek himself, there has been chatter about Robertson landing in Chicago. Now, Nitty Kitty 47's response, you offer him the moon. If he doesn't want it, you now have the biggest trade chip at the trade deadline, which is a very good point, actually. Just look at the Rantanen deal and how that worked out for Carolina. They're headed to the Cup, not Colorado or Dallas. A very, very good point there made by Spencer, with Stankoven being a major piece, at least for Carolina. So, yeah, that's looking like a win for Carolina, despite them, losing out on Rantanen. They're in the Stanley Cup Finals. So, Mastodon says, I don't see any world where the Sharks accept only a second to not take Stenberg, which is very fair. In there, and then Rich Rap does reiterate what Marek says in their scenario. They were imagining the Sharks were likely to take Reed. B-Train says, even so, the leverage would be greater than a second-round pick, which is very fair. Again, if they are likely to take Reed, the Canucks probably don't even have to offer them that second-round pick. JD397 says, how come? It's very possible that they pass on Ivar anyways for no draft pick compensation. Yeah, there's not necessarily so much of a gap between Reed and Stenberg. He may be the top player on their board, in which case they are unlikely to mess around with a trade down. Teams are not like us clowns on the board saying, I'd take any one of those 4 guys. They do a lot of work to identify their guy. So if they are set with Reed and then Vancouver shows up, it's a different deal from an outright trade of the pick. So either the Sharks are planning to take Stenberg and a second is enough, or they weren't planning to take Stenberg in the first place, and the second is wasted by Vancouver. The only situation it matters is if San Jose sees it truly 50-50, and this makes the decision for them. Total Bill 5736 says, couldn't this happen without San Jose at all being involved? Wouldn't Canucks fans be stoked to have Malhotra at 3 and Reed at 4? Rich Rep says, sure, the context on the pod, however, was based on info that the Sedins watched Stenberg in the Worlds. Remember, I mentioned that before and came away really, really interested. Remember, Daniel Sedin was at the Worlds in Switzerland, and he was most likely paying complete attention to Stenberg amongst other players. Chi-Town Chris, so I'm assuming this looks like a Blackhawks fan. Team that would say no would be Dallas unless Robertson is really asking for Kaprizov-type money. Then if Hawks sign him for something like that, it would be win in short term as we have plenty of cap room. but big risk in long term. If he regresses, we have to pay our developing players. That's another big thing with Robertson. If he's looking for Kaprizov-like money, the Blackhawks can easily afford that, unlike Dallas. Ideally, we need to maximize value 2 to 5 years out when prospect pool has developed and we might be at a level to contend. Also, this kind of trade potential does not rely on the player wanting to come to Chicago, which nobody on Reddit knows his feelings about. Rich Rep says part of their setup was the idea that Chicago needs to win now. No more gathering picks and prospects. This was, of course, paraphrasing. They seem to think Dallas is really keen on getting someone like Hronek to pair with Heiskanen. Still not enough for them, I think, which is very fair. Excuse me. I mean, sure, but ultimately, the goal is being cup contenders, and that requires long game planning. The current prospects need time to develop. We have a long way to go to be like Vegas or Carolina, even if we trade for McDavid. It's not going to happen by next year. Many fans want playoffs as fast as possible to feel like there is progress, but the mushy middle is the worst place to be in. Us Canuck fans know all about that. Talking about herd of the Bulls. If these Hawks are anything like the KT dynasty, they should be in the playoffs next year. Western Conference Final the following year with a Stanley Cup win as early as 28-29. Very optimistic there. Granted, they are not like the KT Hawks. Hopefully they will be better, but that's doubtful. But it's not unrealistic to expect they make the playoffs next year, or at the very least are playing until the last week of the season and not sellers at the deadline, although not necessarily buyers either. But our goals have to be lofty. They should be to win as many or more Stanley Cups as those Hawks did. Otherwise, what are we doing here? Dr. Cigarettes _MD says Dallas is not trading Jason Robertson within the division for Hronek and the rights to Mikheyev. That'd be an insane underpay. If a trade were to happen that involves the Hawks landing Robertson, the 4th overall pick would need to be ending up in Dallas, not Vancouver. Rich Rap does respond saying, I think the idea is Dallas's window is open, so they would want players, but I agree, doesn't seem like enough. Maybe adding one of those 2027 first would help trade deadline fodder for them, but they would still have to really like Hronek. Mud Dog says Robertson will not be traded. You never know. This person clearly does not agree with what Marek'S says, calls him a moron, says nobody is trading in the top 5 unless it's a blockbuster deal. Well, this is a blockbuster deal, and nobody is bold enough to do so. Fair point. Matt Segares did mention that a lot of NHL GMs lack spine when it comes to draft day trades compared to the NFL and the NBA. It would need to be a sign and trade only. Even then, that's not enough for RoboCop. Trading top picks doesn't happen in the NHL, which is very true. It does not happen. The last time it happened was in 2004. All 4 of the top teams are going to pick in their assigned spots. I don't think San Jose would do that even if they want Reed. The best move is to take him at 2 to ensure that they get the player they want, but it's kind of immaterial because I definitely don't think Dallas would do that. A win-now team isn't just going to subtract a 100-point forward for a defenseman I'm not sure they even need. Would I trade 4th overall straight up for Robertson from our perspective? Probably. Kind of depends on who's on the board, but Robertson is at least that tier of player where you'd have to consider it. The only catch is that you could add him to the team, and it's still not going to be a real contender until the defense gets better. But having good players does make it easier to get the other good players. This one I did want to point out. There's cap constraints Dallas has, which some people aren't really taking into consideration, at least some of the replies up here when it comes to Dallas. If they keep Robo, then they lose Maverick Bork. Then they have to pay to dump Lyubushkin, which is why they would send Lyubushkin to the Canucks. After all that, they still lack right-handed defensemen. The team gets worse by signing Robo, but they also get worse by trading him, so who knows? Which is a very good point. Talks about a deal with Dallas I'd like to see. Rich Rap, but Dallas has to figure out Robertson before then, so I doubt that option ever comes up. If they sign Robo, they'll have to actively work to cut ties with someone. If they trade Robo, they'll be able to sign Bork, which they may see Bork with more upside because he's a lot younger. basically saying trade Chicago's 4th overall pick and a 2nd round pick to get. Okay, this person is misinterpreting what this is. They think the 2nd overall pick is involved, which it is not. They even mentioned Canucks' first 24th overall pick. This person says, I think Chicago is more likely to move a 2027 first-round pick before their 4th overall pick. I think more likely is a pick swap with Calgary for Coronado and some prospects mixed in. And that is it for that. But my main point of this is I want to know what you guys think, Canuck fans. What do you guys think about this blockbuster idea, trade proposal that Jeff Marek had proposed on both the sheet as well as Sekeres Price? Once again, I will reiterate it. Dallas Stars get Filip Hronek as well as the rights to Ilya Mikheyev. The Canucks get the 4th overall pick, Ilya Lyubushkin, and Ryan Ellis' contract, $6.25 million for 1 season, basically dead cap. And, you know, Ellis is on LTIR. So, and then, of course, Chicago would get the prize with Jason Robertson. The whole point of this whole thing with Marek is he said each team gets something they want. Dallas gets a right-handed defenseman to pair with Miro Heiskanen. Canucks get a 4th overall pick and potentially Stenberg and Malhotra, or Stenberg and a top defenseman. And then Chicago gets that winger or that superstar player to play with Connor Bedard and who can really help out Connor Bedard. Everybody wins. But again, I want to know what you guys think about this insane idea. This is absolutely crazy, but I thought it was worth something to talk about, something to speculate, something to chatter about. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And of course, if you guys liked the video, you can hit that like button, and you can also subscribe to The Line Change for more Canucks and draft-related content. You can also become a member of The Line Change to receive exclusive perks and members-only videos, which include early access to videos such as like this one. And really hope you guys enjoy this. But before I sign off, I want to give a shout out and thank you to the sponsor of this video, our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook, which is, of course, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, has a new customer offer. When the ice gets coldest, the best players in the world show you exactly who they are. Playoff warriors turn it up round by round, and DraftKings turns it up with them from the first round all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Bet player props, bet live from the opening faceoff to the final horn. Every moment matters. New DraftKings customers bet just $5 and you'll get $100 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN so you're ready for the moment. That's code THPN. Turn $5 into $100 in bonus bets instantly in partnership with DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-MY-RESET. New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, wager tax pass-through may apply in Illinois. 21 and over in most states. Void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos. Limited time offer.
Canucks fans, would you trade Filip Hronek if it meant landing a top 5 pick? Let's talk about it in the comments. And I know we completely did not talk about the no trade clause, but we can work our way, we can work around that. But once again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.